Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be showing you how to operate the Cessna 408 Skycourier, which is a neat little aircraft that Cessna basically purpose-built for the purposes of transporting fairly good-sized packages between small airports. And when I say small airport, we've got a small airport. We also have a really nasty crosswind. It is the middle of the winter for us right now. We're flying with real-world weather, so all the stuff you see right now is true, including my absolutely frozen toes at the moment. So let's get this thing going. You probably recognize this aircraft from career mode. If you have not experimented with it a little bit, we're just going to kind of walk you through some of the suggestions I have to fly it as we go. We're just going to get rid of the engine covers. We're going to get rid of the pitot covers. And we're just going to crouch down here and pop off the chocks. Now, if you pop over to the other side, you'll probably observe that it grabbed everything on that side too. And one of the things you can actually do, which I think is kind of cool, is if you actually lift the lid here, you can kind of stick your head in there and sort of stick whatever loose bag or something you want to pop in there, again, depending on what you need. So let's go ahead and climb on in. I think this is kind of fun because when you click it, you actually can see the stairs start to come down. And then we pop up, and now we're inside. Now, the first thing you'll probably observe is the fact my aircraft is clipping into the side of this building. That's not very good. So I'm going to press Shift-Z real quick. I'm just going to take advantage of my magic here. And we're just going to make a little tactical adjustment. Good enough. Perfect. Now, this aircraft is very modern in just about every way. It is also a little tiny bit buggy, like most of the things we have coming from Flight Sim this day. But that being said, it's actually kind of nice. I'm really, really impressed with the range of this aircraft. It goes pretty good. It flies really, really high. It's relatively comfortable. And the avionics are very modern, which makes my life great. So what we're going to do is we're just going to walk you through the basic startup procedure. We're not using any particular checklist. It's basically a complete flow-based aircraft. Once you kind of get the flow, it becomes very, very easy to operate. So what I like to do is I like to begin right here, kind of in the middle console here. We're just going to confirm our trims are nice and centered, which they are. Flaps agree. Oh, we got a friction. We're not going to worry about it. We're going to grab onto our propeller RPM and make sure it's in the forward position. And we're just going to double check to make sure that our two condition levers are all the way back. Next, what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of continue moving up here. We're going to make sure oxygen doesn't need to be turned on. But one thing we do want to confirm is that our air conditioning is off and our bleed air is off as well. Looks good to me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to turn my lights on. So as soon as my battery comes up, everybody around me is going to know that I'm ready to party. We're a party plane. So that's going to be taken care of just like that. And then I'm going to swing over to this side. You can get rid of this just by clicking there. Be careful what you click, though, because you'll do what I'm doing and adjusting the rudder trim. You don't want to do that. Disregard. I had to delete this file in order to get my sound back. Sigh. So if you take a look at our battery switch, you'll notice it has two positions. It has basically an ops position, a ground position, and kind of this imaginary off position. We're going to pop it to the ops position. So I'm going to hold my mouse over it, and if you click and drag, you'll click over, and it's going to beep at you a lot. And you'll notice my Garvin avionics immediately come firing up. There's a very real desire to go ahead and now press the enter key, and I'm going to do that, even though this is going to cause my engine display to jump to this side. This is actually a good thing for us. You're also going to get about 1,000 different error messages that pop up. Don't worry, this aircraft is just beginning to have error messages. We'll get there in a few moments. I love the fact we've got the little test knob and things. You can
Overspeed.
You can go through all the different. It's so fun. You can do all the emergencies. I don't know. I think that's kind of cool. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start by arming our ignition for the side we're going to start. We're going to put the boost pump on for the side that we're going to start, and then we're going to engage the starter. This is a relatively straightforward process. Make sure your generator is off. So when you hit that button, what you'll observe is you'll notice your NG, which is going to be our gas generator RPM, start to come up. There's some DLSS action in action there. So we got about 10% here, and we need a minimum of 12%. But the reality is you really want to let this rev as high as it can go before you actually engage the fuel here. 17, 18, 19. It's starting to cap out at about 25. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to engage the fuel by just pushing that up one notch. Again, hold your mouse over it and just roll your mouse wheel forward. You can see we got ignition. No problem. And now we're looking for about 50% and one. Right about there. Going to shut that off. If you get a warning, you can just tap it. And you can see our engine has started up quite smoothly. It is nice and cool. The RPM is coming up very slowly. The NG is good. Fuel flow is delightful. And now we're going to engage the generator on that side. That'll get us some electrical power floating around. You can see we're at 28 volts and we're at 48 amps. Plenty. That'll keep us pretty warm. So what we're going to do now is engage the other engine. Same technique. We're going to arm the ignition, arm the fuel pump, and then engage the starter. Once you do that, it's going to holler and get very grumpy at you, but don't worry about it. It's part of the fun, as they say. I also appreciate we have two separate starter warnings here, but I'm going to ignore that for this time. So we can see, just like before, our NG is starting to shoot up quite aggressively there. It does not take much to get this thing going, and I'm very impressed with how strong the starter is on a day this cold. It is not warm outside. You can actually see by the interstage turbine temperature. Going to give that a push once we exceed our RPM there, and you can see that the thing is starting to spin up very smoothly. We've got about 710 RPM on one side, And as before, we're waiting for about 50% of the NG. There it is right there. We're going to disengage that. I'm going to go tap the warning just to acknowledge it. And we're just going to let everybody just take a couple minutes to get spooled up. Now, one thing that really surprises me is there's not this massive cloud of basically snow behind us. But one of the things we do want to keep in mind here is we are dealing with snow. We are dealing with turboprop engines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to engage the electrical system here. And now normally what we do is you see these two inertial separator switches. These are going to bypass the primary air intakes and I'll basically run them through a big centrifugal separator to keep the nastiness out of here. So with those set, that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go over here. I'm just going to go ahead and activate my pitot static heat system. Like I said, it is pretty cold today. So now we're in pretty good shape. The engines are warming up smoothly. The interior, we can flip on a light. Everything's all set here. Starters disengaged. Fuel's good. We're going to come over here. I'm going to go ahead and double check all these handles. Delightful. I'm going to turn the heat on. Definitely would benefit from some heat here. All right. The one thing we would normally not do in the real world is we wouldn't actually arm the auto feather at this time. You can see this one more error message out of the way. And of course, it's yelling about the transponder. So we can come over to transponder, set it to altitude mode, press back, and now everything is squared away. All of our angry warnings are gone. You can bring up the alert page if you're so concerned with that. And we're basically warming up. Now, this aircraft is literally starting to cook us, which is delightful, and I think that's nice. If it were the summer, of course, you could flip on the imaginary air conditioner there if it gets stressed out, but the reality is that it doesn't do anything in the SIB, so don't worry about it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to set up our flight plan. We have a very, very easy flight today. We're not doing anything complicated. This is supposed to be basically a point-to-point kind of an aircraft, and that's exactly what I intend to use it for our purposes today. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be traveling from Newfound Valley, that's 2 November 2 is where we are now, and traveling to Harmon in West. I also notice, I think this one is North Adams. So I'm going to press the FIPL page, and it's going to give us a bunch of options here. I'm going to go ahead and right-click on this knob here. We're going to go to my origin, and my origin story. I'm just going to come over here with the little knob. I'm just going to hit it with my mouse wheel, and it's going to say, where are we starting? 2 November 2. Don't forget to shut off the little keyboard button. Press enter. It says, is this the one you want? This is the one that I want. That's very nice. You can see we're kind of an airport runway kind of facing that direction. So that's going to be runway. That's not runway 3. Does that look like runway 3 to you? Oh, I'm turned. It makes sense. So, of course, our north-facing runway would be kind of that way. If we took a right turn. No, this is backwards. I apologize, everyone. It should be runway 21. There we go. Got it. Press enter to accept. Looks delightful. We're taking route just like that. En route. We don't really have an en route here. If we wanted to add one, I'm just trying to think if there's anything that's going to be on the way. I guess we could do keen on the way. So let me come in here. I'll go and give it a wiggle. We'll do push the little button, EEN. Let's see if it's going to recognize that. It does. Go ahead and add that one as a position. Don't forget to shut the keyboard button off when you do it that way. Nice. So it's going to be Echo, Echo, November. And then, of course, our destination here. I'm just going to give that a quick little wiggle. We're going to do Kilo, Alpha, Quebec, Whiskey, Harmon, West. This is going to be, to say the least, it's going to be a sketchy runway to try to get an airplane like this into. And obviously, I need to take a look at the weather today. The weather down there is, let's see here, 017 gusting 29 from the west. Oh, my goodness. That is going to be a lot of landing for us. So we'll do runway 29er. And we can just come in here and press enter, accept. And you can see everything is automatically basically tuned itself. When we're done with this, all we have to do is come back to this, right click, and it's going to pop us out of that mode. And if we want to hide the flight plan page, we can just hit it like that. And again, we've done stuff like this before. So what I do want to do, though, is I want to go, boop, pull the right click there. You can see my little mouse mode. I just want to look real quick. That looks good. Isn't this cool? It's got like a little cursor thing. Isn't that fun? I don't know. I just right click on that to make it go away. Yep, that looks like our route for today. Delightful. So now what I like to do is I get my autopilot all squared away. And again, this is why we have co-pilots to help us out with this in the real world. The reality is, though, it's kind of fun to do it yourself, too. So altitude, obviously, we're flying over a lot of very large mountains. Our minimum altitude today has to be 3,900 feet, actually 4,100 feet. But we're not going to cross that position, so I'm not worried about it too much. So we'll go ahead and take a little bit more wiggly room. We're traveling to the west today, and we're traveling on our VFR flight rules. So 6,500 feet is delightful for us. So that'll take us in that direction quite nicely. I like that. Looks good. Takes a right. Looks good. Check, check, chickity check before you riggedy wreck. All right, CDI is selected to be that. One thing I do want to do, though, is that we've got quite a bit of wind going on here. Don't you dare. Quite a bit of wind going on here today. So what I would like to do, when I'm at PFD options, wind mode. Option 3 is already pre-selected. Delightful. It sounds like something like myself set that up earlier. All right, we are ready to go. So the last thing we would do normally in the real world, of course, is we'd pop our flaps down. The reason we're not going to touch the flaps is because there's the risk of ice. Do not touch your flaps if there is icy water conditions, because you tend to put the flaps down, the ice and water gets kicked up into the flap, and it tends to freeze things, and that's really bad. And obviously, if we were de-icing or something like that today, we'd get to it. So we're ready to go. We're going to go ahead and taxi over to the runway. Last little things we need to worry about here is going to be our taxiing light to give everybody a little heads up that we're about to go do some stuff. Now, be careful here. One of the things I recommend is go ahead and hold the brakes on your joystick and then release the parking brake. If you don't, you're going to roll like that immediately. The torque on this thing, or the thrust on this thing when it's this lightweight, is just, it's something else. So we're going to give it a nice gentle tap. If we were a little heavier, what you could do is you could actually use the beta range. We don't have that capability, but notice this thing starts rolling fast. So go ahead and I gently apply that brake and do a little bit better of a job than I did, almost hitting that roof. And that looks good. All right, so pop onto the runway here. I'm going to go ahead and hit my brakes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and engage those flaps I promised you. We're going to go 1-2 clicks of flaps. We have a very short runway today, so we're going to take advantage of it. We're also going to put our idle up. So I'm just going to hold my mouse over this, go click, click. And if you look down here, it'll actually say cold start, which is exactly our conditions. All right, lights, camera, action, folks. We've got our lights. We're going to flip on. Landing light's going to come on. I hate how the switches... Look, I'm going up. I'm going up. Just use your middle. Your scroll wheel works a lot better. So that's all set like that. Our altitude selected. Everything's good. Our speed today is going to be 85 for liftoff. Hold the brake. Release the parking brake. And I'm just going to roll onto the runway here. Now, one of the things I found wild about this aircraft, and I still find kind of wild about this aircraft, is the fact it's not retractable landing gear. I was not expecting that the first time that happened. I'm like, wow, the landing gear really quiet on this thing. There's no retractable landing gear. All right, I see a disaster waiting to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be very gentle with this takeoff. So we're going to be taking off in a 30-knot crosswind, which is wonderful because that's a great exercise for a plane like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my yoke. I'm going to tip my yoke into the wind here. If you do not do this, this aircraft will get picked right off and jerked to the side of the runway. So I'm going to go ahead and keep that over there on the right. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a standard takeoff. After we get up at about 85 knots, we're going to be climbing at our VY of about 105. Yes, the VX is a different speed than the VY, and the VX is higher than the VY. I didn't design this aircraft. I'm just the one who flies it. So I'm going to go ahead and give this thing about half power, waiting for my engines to spool up together. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to take your throttle and pop it up to about almost 80%. There we go. Whoa, whoa, it's trying to come off the runway. Whoa, whoa, off we go. Woohoo! Whoa, maybe this was not the best idea to fly with real weather today, but shame on me for doing something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to climb pretty steeply here. This aircraft has a staggering amount of thrust, especially at this weight. Once we're a little satisfied, we're going to push the nose down to about 15 to 10 degrees. We're going to go ahead and pop down the notch of flaps. The plane's going to settle a little bit. You're going to pop down the next notch of flaps. And you're going to go ahead and pull back a little bit and get your VY speed. Now, the interesting thing is we can climb like this. Now, I don't love climbing like this when I have passengers, obviously when it's just me and a bunch of boxes in the back seat. And you are everywhere. We have the ability to go ahead and basically maintain this at all times. Let me go ahead and give this a couple clicks of flaps. A couple clicks of trim. There we go. That's delightful. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to engage the flight director. Now you're going to see it's way down here because it knows we're being naughty. And I'm going to go ahead and engage the yaw damper. That's going to be the second button. Yaw damper is going to knock out some of the bumps that we get. With that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and engage the automatic pilots. You'll notice we're on roll mode and we're on pitch mode. The AP is engaged. We're going to come over here now. I'm going to just go press a couple different buttons. We're going to go ahead and do the flight level change mode. 121 knots is a pretty good cruise climb for us, but we can go a lot slower depending on the cabin angle we want to maintain. Obviously, if we want to do 110, that's on you. It just means a very, 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 very steep climb, if that's what you're trying to achieve. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip on navigation mode. I'm going to go tap the nav button once. As long as you were close to your GPS course, which is what we were, it'll lock right onto that and I'll basically start taking you up pretty much right away. At this point, it's just a matter of kind of cleaning up the last couple switches. We don't need landing lights anymore, so I can pop those off just like that. And you can see our aircraft is, we're up pretty steep. I don't know about you, but I don't know that I'd want to be traveling at a cabin angle like this. Obviously, you're not in the airplane with me, but believe me when I say you feel it on your chest when you climb like this in the real world. It's pretty intimidating. Wow, look at that weather. Man, my toesies are extra frozies right now. But it gives you an idea of just like what it looks like. And you can actually see where we're heading. There's actually a mountain over there, Mount Monadnock, which is going to be one of our key destinations along the way. Now, to make things really exciting for us today, of course, I'm taking a look at the weather forecast. In North Adams Airport right now is got overcast clouds at 3,800. Limited visibility. Oh, it's going to be fun. That means we get to test out our capabilities for de-icing, which is going to be awesome. So on our way now that we've settled down at our cruise altitude, you can see the aircraft is taking a moment to settle. If you see it running away on you, you can always go ahead and disengage the automatic pilot and correct anything yourself. I find that the autopilot in the real world is a pretty good system. I don't know so much about the sim. Go ahead and re-engage that like that. And I'm going to just gently go ahead and start backing out my thrust here. Let's see here. Come on. Just give it a couple taps of trim there. There we go. Delightful. Sometimes it helps if you just fly the thing yourself. There we go. Wants to pitch back up again. Ah, I see the issue. There we go. Autopilot on, alt. Let's see if that settles it. Actually, now I'm just curious to see what altitude it settles at. I'm going to let that do that. Maybe I found another bug. So what we have here is, if you take a look now, we're going to be getting ourselves set up for cruise. This aircraft is very capable for a very, very, very high-speed cruise. And one of the things I recommend is when you are setting it up for cruise, that basically what you're trying to do is not overheat anything at the same time as managing a reasonable speed. Apparently this aircraft has decided 7,000 is actually equal to 6,500? I blame it on her. All right, so we've leveled off at our cruise altitude, which apparently is not the cruise altitude I selected. Oh, well. And now what we're going to do is we're going to get everything set up here. So during cruise, basically, as long as you don't exceed your ITT or your torque limits, you can go basically as fast as you can, also not exceeding your little yellow speed. At altitudes like this, if I were to stick my throttle forward a little bit here, I'll kind of kick it up just a bit here. And we'll let it get going about 75. Whoop. Delightful. You can see that it takes us nothing to basically exceed our maximum speed here. And you want to be very mindful that we are not supposed to do that. Obviously, if there's any bad turbulence or anything like that, that could cause all sorts of nastiness for us. But it looks about 65%, 66% torque is delightful. It is very tempting, of course, to reduce your RPM, which is something we can do. One of the things you can do here is basically this is the noise lever, if you want to think about it another way. If you want to reduce the cabin noise, what you do is you reduce your RPM. And again, you can come down a little bit. Our green range in this one is massive, so you can come down to like 65, 1650, for example. And that's not going to make that much of a difference. You can actually hear the whole thing spooling up and down. Now, one of the things you'll find very fascinating here is at 1,650 RPM, you'll notice this throttle's almost, or I should say the prop handle is nearly 80% back. So that's pretty substantial. The other thing I notice here, too, is we're already at 182, and I'm barely doing anything here. Just giving you an idea of what kind of performance this aircraft does have at altitude. So I'm actually going to have to back the throttle off a little bit. All right, now we're on our way. We're kind of pro-conching there. We'll start thinking about how we're going to get ourselves back on the ground at a moment. I don't know what the deal with this is. This must have been something that came out recently because I've not seen that before. The fact of the matter is we're safe. I'm a pilot. Things like this happen in the real world. It's just part of the fun, as I like to say. Probably something to do with the altimeter if I had to guess, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. All right, so now that we're cruising along, it's time to start thinking about how we're going to settle this aircraft onto its particular ground. Now, I was looking at the forecast a minute ago, and I noticed the fact that our forecast shows that, like I said, it's a pretty nasty, pretty overcast. You can actually see the cloud layer directly ahead of us as we're making our way kind of towards that direction. So what I'm going to do is skip to the trip until we get just at the top of our descent. Looks like we're starting to encounter some nasty clouds that are probably filled with all sorts of icky ice. So one of the things you saw me do earlier was to engage the inertial separators. Whenever you're traveling through a cloud like this, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and engage those inertial separators. The idea is you're really not supposed to be cruising with these in the case that we're doing, but in the event that you have something that could potentially damage your fan blades, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and engage that just for a little bit of extra safety here. So we're just about to our destination now. This is a kind of interesting approach here. We're going to make this one a visual approach, but we're going to have to get through some clouds here. I'm a little nervous about the nastiness as far as our icing conditions goes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and flip on a couple of our different options here. Again, we have a bunch of different things. Whoop. Setting the parking brake really doesn't do much for us. You can see here we've got our windshield heat, our prop heat, our wing stability, and of course we have our pitot static heat. This is nothing but a wall of ice we're traveling through right now at temperatures like this. You know, kind of just coming down here real quick. It's 19 degrees Celsius in the negatives direction. This is very unpleasant conditions for our airplane. We're also in a very mountainous area, and we need to start our descent. So this is a pretty cool airport. I really, really like this one. One of the reasons I like it is just it's neat, and I've flown it in the real world. We have a local altitude of 1654, so our altitude we're going to be targeting is about 1,600 feet. So I'm going to come over here and drop this down to about 1,600 feet. This is going to be our altitude for our traffic pattern. Come down to 1,600. Looks good to me. We're going to switch to vertical speed mode. And all I'm going to do is set myself at... Why is that reversed? Why is this reversed? I don't know. Sometimes I wonder why I play this game. If you learned anything from me, it's the importance of perseverance. Perseverance. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're on our way down. We're going to go flick on some lights to let everybody know that we're coming through. Obviously, in the real world, this would be an instrument flight plan. It's incredibly cold. And obviously, during our descent, we want to make sure that our airspeed remains under a yellow arc here. Otherwise, things get kind of nasty for us pretty quick. The synthetic terrain here is beautiful. It makes it so much safer flying in this region of Massachusetts and New York. It just makes it simple. Okay, now we have some geometry we have to work out here. So if you take a look here, we're coming into runway 29er. Our present heading is about 27, which means we're looking in a straight-in approach to land. That's awesome. In the real world, we're generally a little resistant to do a straight-in approach on account of the fact that when we do straight-in approaches, we have a strong tendency to basically run over anybody who's already there. That's just something you want to always be mindful of. Also notice that we're going to be there in 5 minutes, and I've got, let's see, 55. We got to come down a lot faster. So I'm actually going to pull my throttle back even more. And again, the thing I love about turboprop engines is that you can be not rough with them, but you can be a little bit less concerned with damaging them from shock cooling, to say the least. Let's go ahead and reset our barometer here, our pressure here. You can see it's 299.6 in this part of the region. Not too bad. And one of the things we can check, of course, is we can listen for the weather. It's 134775. So I'm just going to come over here, 134, 134. And we're going to do 775 today, getting bounced around nicely there. I love it. Go ahead and swap that over. And you did see me do that, right? Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb. All right, I'll do it the old-fashioned way. Old-fashioned new airport. We're going to do Harriman West, automated weather.
Kilo Alpha, Quebec, Whiskey, automated weather observation 1300 Zulu. Wind 284 at 17. Visibility 8. Sky condition, ceiling 1,700 foot overcast. Temperature 11C's dew point. 17C, altimeter 299er601.
Nice. So what that tells us is a lot of things. First of all, if this were the real world, we would have to do an instrument approach because the ceiling is so low that we can't stay 500 feet away from the cloud cover and still be able to safely don. One of the things you need to know about ceiling, however, and this is something I did not know in my early days of flying because I was too dumb to realize it. By the way, we got to level off right now, otherwise we're going to smack into this mountain. One of the things I learned in the early days is ceiling is always above ground level. It is not above sea level. So even though it's a 1,700 foot ceiling, we only need to come down to 1,000 feet above ground level in order to safely navigate the region that we're traveling through right now. And again, like I mentioned earlier, this is definitely a really sketchy area. So for those of you who are joining us on this beautiful flight today, you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to be up against. So I'm noticing it's getting a little dark in here. The panels are pretty good. We have our map lights and stuff like that. That's all good. The big thing we need to keep in mind is as we're coming in for a landing here is just remembering that we are a short takeoff and landing plane. We do have a delightful capability on here. You'll notice it's got reverse. You're going to want to make sure you have a button on your keyboard for it. The other thing we know is we're going to be coming into a very, very strong headwind when we come in for a landing. It's going to be coming slightly off our right. So when we do settle into the ground, we need to make sure we get that right wing down a little bit as we start to settle. All right, looking out my window here, things look really, really good so far. Can you see the runway? You see it? You see it? Use your eyes. See it? That's it. Right there. And just as I promised, there's a big, nasty, scary mountain right here. I have some really good photographs of actually landing here in a Mooney of all planes, coming in here the first time. There's a bunch of gliders doing their glider thing, and they were being extra irritating because it was very, very difficult to get lined up for this little tiny thing when, of course, they have right of way, as you're well aware. All right, let's land. So let's go ahead and run through our landing checks here. The big thing with this aircraft is our approach speed. Like with many, many things, is going to be predicated on how much weight you're carrying, obviously conditions. It is so cold outside right now. How cold is it? That the snowman came in from the snow in order to rest in my refrigerator. No, but the key thing here that you have to know is it's going to be completely based on the weight of your aircraft and the local conditions. So what I like to do is I like to go ahead and slow the aircraft down, and I actually like to figure out what my speed is going to be using the angle of attack of the aircraft. And I'll go ahead and start settling in here. Approach speed is probably going to be around 90 to 100. We'll see kind of how it settles. I'm going to go ahead and leave my propeller handle at the previous position. That's going to be fine for me. And all we're going to do is kind of take over manually. And you can see just how cool of an approach this is. And some idiot decided to put a runway in the way of a mountain. What are you going to do, right? So So taking a look down here, I can see that my wind is 45 knots. I did say you were going to get a show today, didn't I? So on this approach, since we're doing a nice straight-in approach, you can see that 1,700-foot ceiling is not going to affect us. The big thing for us is respecting the fact that the aircraft is not going to want to be stable after it settles. It's still going to have plenty of lift. The reality is those glider pilots that I was concerned with earlier, they're not going to be bothering you today. What am I looking at over there? Oh, that's all the ice forming on my screen. Nothing to worry about. All those glider pilots are going to be inside today, so we don't have to worry about that as much. But obviously in the real world, we want to be communicating our intentions down to the ground and everything along those lines. Whoa! Always do that by accident. All right, let's start settling in. Power comes out. Pull the nose up a little bit. We're going to bring in one click of flaps. That one click of flaps is perfectly fine at those speeds. It's just going to help us slow down a little bit. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to feel out the sink rate. I pulled my nose up a little bit. You can see I'm now level, and that's about a 6-degree angle of attack. That's actually almost perfect. All right, we're going to get our next click of flaps in now that we're safely in the white arc of 140 knots. Starting to feel the turbulence. Nothing new there. This aircraft just takes it. I love it. You can hear my RPM coming down. That's a cue to go ahead and push my RPM handle forward. So now we have selected full RPM. If we had to go around, we have the capability. All right, let's do some idiot checks here. Our gas is set, undercarriage, mixture, propeller flaps, lights, and speed is delightful. Let's go ahead and get that last couple clicks of flaps in. And now we're going to come in at about 90 knots. So we're up pretty high at this particular point. Now, because you are a turboprop engine, this thing takes a little while to spool up and spool down. Starting to realize just how massive these mountains are. Oh man, this is so beautiful. I've seen this many, many times in the real world, fortunately, and it's just cool. There we go. I'm going to give it just a little bit of power. We're coming in a little hot right now. One of the things you can do with this plane, which I think is so cool, is you can actually slip the plane. There's absolutely nothing wrong with slipping an aircraft this large. It just would take a lot of physical force. There we go. And we're at completely zero thrust. I'm actually going to push the nose down a little bit here. And the reason I'm pushing the nose down is when I pull up, 400. We can take advantage of the drag of the aircraft. There we go.
300.
There we go. Perfect. And now we're all set. Again, my throttle's at idle. I'm basically coasting in here. The flaps aren't doing much, but that's okay. Airspeed is good. Airspeed is good. Flaps are good. Man, that is the world's shortest displaced threshold. All right, remember, wind is coming a little bit right down the runway here.
100.
Easy. 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 Deer on the runway. Deer on the runway. Deer on the runway. That's a moose! Excuse you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring up my flaps. When you do that, of course, the nose is going to settle immediately. Got to bring my little bit right ailerons. Delightful. Whenever I see something dangerous, like moose or something like that, you probably want to get over their heads there. All right, and now we are safely on the ground. Not much of a flare for that landing, but like I said, dodging moose are priority one. In the real world, if you see moose on the runway, just go around. And what you're probably going to want to do is you're actually going to want to do a low approach over the runway to basically scare the mooses off and then come back and do your actual landing. But I thought that was kind of a nice little touch there at the end. On the ground, this aircraft is going to have a tendency to go very, very fast. You can see we're doing about 45 knots. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce to a low idle here. Just like that. Nice. And we're going to give it a little bit of power. Oh, man, that is a strong wind. Wow. That is impressive. 28 knot down the wind there. Very delightful. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to kind of come around and get this aircraft all nice and settled. One of the things we could have done a little differently there is definitely come in at a lower angle of attack, or a lower altitude there. It was a little reckless of us to come in that speed. However, because of that incredibly strong wind, at any moment, that wind could have cut out on us, and we would have found ourselves splatting on the ground, which would have been really, really... What am I looking at right there? You do see that, right? There's a whole family of them. Look at that. Better run, cows. I'm sorry, I didn't expect to see that. All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to settle here. And again, once this thing gets rolling on the runway, it takes a lot of effort to get it to slow back down. So again, try to do the best you can to control the speed. I'm going to go ahead and pretend this is the spot I'd like to park, which is right in the worst place to park here. And we'll go ahead and shut everything down. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and disengage everything pretty much in the reverse order that we engaged it here. You want to make sure the auto ignition is off. And we also want to make sure just like that, you're going to get a bunch of warning handles. Very easy to shut this thing down. You're just going to grab this and click it, and you're going to get a bunch of very angry warning messages here. And obviously, when the propellers do come to a complete stop, as they're coming down in a moment, so make sure my boost pumps are off, just like that, just like that. Check, check, chickadee check, Good to go, good to go. We're just going to shut off our generators, and when you're ready, you pop off the battery switch and enjoy.